done. Fortunately, there's no Seahawks game or something like that to really distract you. Yes, it is wet out there, and the traffic is not very good. So thank you for making the trek. Before we get started, I'd like to read a poem by a favorite poet of mine, Naomi Beth Wacken, who lives on Gabriel Island in British Columbia. And this is from her book, Sex After 70. It's called On Reading Diane Ackerman. I read on, compelled by her metaphors and similes, until, after finding 5 in one sentence, I call out, "Enough!" and lay the book down. I lie and wonder why she continually says this is like that, and why she doesn't say how this is like this. Basho could show her how. For writing of a black crow on a bare branch at sunset, he doesn't mention black witches or gnarled limbs of unfortunates or dark curtains descending once. Yet his crow, his bare branch, his sunset are enough to tell me all I need to know about time passing, sadness, austerity, and the ways of the world in autumn. That's Naomi Beth Wacken. If you would like to sign up for our open mic reading, we have a sign-up sheet right down here, and so far there's only one. This is the smallest open mic we've ever had. Come on, there's got to be a few more of you that will sign up, especially those of you who are thinking about it. Please feel no pressure whatsoever, but there is a sign-up there, and we have a question of the month, and the question this month is, what is your go-to karaoke song? So have some fun with that, or just make something up. You could say, The Messiah, if you like, or something magnificent. Please sign up for that. I also wanted to mention I have Redmond Poet Laureate bookmarks with a few poems and some information, there goes, about events coming up. And I also have a postcard for the Poets Wanted series, which starts next week, which you're very welcome to attend. Just briefly what that is, it's held at the Redmond Library. It's Wednesday nights starting next week, and it goes for 6 weeks, except it skips 1 week. And we're featuring dead poets who will not be making appearances. Octavio Paz, and for that, that's on January 21, and for that we expect to have one of his students who knew him come and talk about his experiences, and I'll also be talking about him, and you're welcome to come, bring poems to read, discuss. We'll show some videos, video interpretations of poetry, and so on. Then the next week, January 28th, we'll be featuring Robert Frost, and I'm working with the Robert Frost Elementary School, I think it's in Bellevue, to have a set of their students come and perform their reading classes, come and perform Frost poems. Plus we'll have the usual videos and discussion and so on, so that should be fun. February 11 for National Haiku Writing Month in February, I'll be featuring Basho, the haiku poet. Then a week later, February 18, is Rabindranath Tagore, the Bengali poet. And I'm looking for somebody who's an expert in Tagore to come and speak about him. That's the one hole in the schedule still, but I'll cover if necessary. And then a week later, we're featuring Theodor Retke, and I hope to have one of his students come and talk about our beloved Seattle poet. So please come to that, and there are postcards on some of the tables if you'd like to get one. And those are all free, and there may sometimes be refreshments. We're not sure. Okay, let's launch into our featured readers for this evening. We have 2 readers, Anne McDuffie and Michael Schmelzer, and Michael will be going first, and I'll share a bit of information about him. He earned his MFA from the Rainier Writing Workshop. His honors include numerous Pushcart Prize nominations, the Gulfstream Award for Poetry, and the Blue Earth Review's Flash Fiction Prize. Are you going to read any flash fiction for us tonight? Don't have to. Okay. All right. Good. He has been a finalist for the Four-Way Books Intro and Levi's Prizes, Zone 3 Press First Book Prize, as well as the OSU Press The Journal Award in Poetry. He helps edit a River and Sound review and has been published in Pank, Rattle, The Journal, Natural Bridge, Mid-American Review, Waterstone Review, New York Quarterly, Bellingham Review, and 14 Hills, among other journals. And I'm envious of most of those, except I'm about to be published in Rattle for the first time myself. So please help me welcome Michael Schmelzer.
First of all, I want to say thank you for everyone here for attending and listening to poetry on this rainy day. Thank you to Michael and Anne for the invite to co-read with you. It'll be a pleasure. I should just say right off the bat that when I do readings now, I actually write little lyric interludes before the poems instead of me just standing up here rambling between the poems as an intro. It just helps calm my nerves, and it's also just a way to incorporate hybrid work. And as I've grown as a reader and writer, I tend to like stretching and straddling genres. So here goes. Mary Jo Bang wrote, "This is life's bargain. That motion is hope." But what does it imply when those words are stationary on stationary? What does it mean when our desire for movement is somehow restricted? When we find ourselves in a sort of domestic panic? In those moments, I want to be frozen and yet have inside me this great momentum, a tumble towards ecstasy, part folly and full of pleasure. Come home and tender. I set fire to every chair cowering near the dining room table, and no one noticed me or squelched them. How novel, yet not even the thermostat turned off. The only alarm in the house is our black cat's meow, which coaxes me into consciousness. Good morning, says no one. Good morning, I don't say back. I never want to be one who serves little foods on little plates. I envy people who've never held a grapefruit spoon. There are men so hungry, as soon as I turn the gas stove on, they would fling me right in. Outside, the crows conspire. Love, come home and tender. I've plucked the stars like feathers from a chicken. I have made for us a dinner we can eat with bare hands. Even invisible, I go with a bang. Imagine a clock strapped to a man's barrel chest, his hands clutching a bomb like a bride and her bouquet. Watch him walk the crowded aisle of a train, running behind schedule, and a child counting down the seconds on his bird-bone hands. This is how I pass my days. Of course, my wiring is off, just enough not to explode. If there is one old woman soiling herself at the cafe, there are a dozen others who smell it and won't crack a joke. Unless they're nose dumb, I don't know how they stay on track. Right now, I'm struck silly with hunger. Too famished to finish writing this letter to my friend, who is dead anyway. I stare at the floral stationery while I eat chip after chip. I'm sure one measure of depression is appetite, its absence or double presence. Either way, we suffer this flavorless existence. Love, while you were at work, I cleaned the living room window so well, the most adorable sparrow charged to her death. This too I cleaned. Thank you. Yeah. She's going to buy my book when it comes out someday. The idea of movement fascinates me, specifically where movement is generated by desire in the body. Sometimes this desire is a coming-of-age story. Sometimes it's the going-of-way of youth that drives it. Regardless, there is a relationship. And in any relationship, whether predator and prey, partner and partner, parent and child, there are dueling desires. We move away and towards, a tug and pull, a tug of war. Peristalsis, Bildungsroman. The way the worm ripples forward, the way a boy and girl, disgusted by the movement, follow, the writhing that occurs in them when the girl pinches the head between her thumb, when she cuts the worm to pieces. Segment by segment, they become strange, think in repulsion, and perform on desire. What bits are left they throw to the lawn. One piece they neglect, delivers itself like a parcel to their door, a box they won't remember opening. Desire, however we define it, causes action and in turn reactions. There is movement, a call and response, like a personal ad placed in a paper. Our appetites directed by our stomach, or the desire for touch. And I should mention that the next couple of poems are my personal ad series that I've worked on and owe a great debt to CD Wright's poem Personals. Personal ad number 6. An egg delicate repairs the days now cracked. When I first heard about the Twin Towers, I thought, how do we move on from here? And the next day I cracked and poured 3 eggs on a skillet, made myself an omelet. I bought boneless, skinless chicken breasts. I made stuffing. I baked an apple pie with an old family recipe, sprinkling cinnamon generously over the crust. In my head, I colored each day like another barn in a paint-by-numbers landscape. Do you understand? Let me put it this way. When we meet, I will fuck you so moderately, you will not want to call, but you will. Each number pressed will feel as rewarding as stepping over a load of dirty laundry. Do you know why? Because we move on by doing the things that bored us before. Personal ad number 4. Once I lost sleep, the world made sense. I don't sleep well, which suits me. I like infomercials and how impossible everyday tasks appear. It's the only thing on TV that shows life as is, mundane and difficult. But I also like how excited the audience gets. I want to find that kind of bliss. I like the word daybreak, but don't actually like daybreak. I prefer ash to a freshly rolled cigarette, if you know what I mean. My mother smoked in the morning, the way most people ate breakfast. When I think back, I picture her chewing cigarettes like cud between sips of her black coffee. I'm sure she didn't. Memory is funny like that. I worry about aging as often as I worry about milk already soured. Are you old enough to remember Columbus Day as a good thing? I'm not sure what we celebrate anymore. I drink screwdrivers to cope with my father's drinking, which is why I sympathize with foxes gnawing off their own legs. Fight teeth with teeth, no one ever said. Do you know how many wisdoms I've misheard in my life? Enough to know darkness. Enough to know 2 wrongs never made a light. Yes to the house of hummingbird and bee. Once upon a train station, I watched a couple embrace with such sparkler urgency, arrival or departure didn't matter. Elsewhere on the platform, a little boy with a fistful of daisies, dirt still fresh on the roots, and a woman not his mother, neither hand open. This is the way the saddest metamorphosis begins. Ever since then, I've wanted the dazzling sun, to be seduced by heliotropes and not always the other way around. Often longing forks like the tongue of a hummingbird. Often each path offers its own dead ends. In other words, every old ache is one part pollen and one part nectar. Even now, you are wonderfully misplaced, like my favorite bedtime story, read out loud in the morning. Leave me a number, fake or not, no matter. A stranger's hello on the telephone is a door wide open in a home abandoned. My mouth is an overrun garden where my tongue like a bee darts, speech frenetic as a hive. The kindest thing I've ever done was lie about every person at that station until you fell asleep. Only then did I tell you what happened to that boy. Longing, like light years, is a measure of distance. Time is implied. For instance, I am thinking of one woman I loved alive and another I loved who is not. No matter which way I travel, both are equidistant from me. No matter the method, by foot or by car, always I move away. How many of us travel by rail? The railroad as means of transportation, the running surfaces for locomotives. And how many of us travel by the other definition of rail, to utter bitter complaint, a vehement denunciation, often followed by at or against. I long for those I've lost. I often write in elegy. In other words, I travel by rail to the beloved, and move in and through grief in bitter complaint and vehement denunciation toward that immeasurable distance, lit like the end of a tunnel, and I am never sure if I chase the bright tail of light or if I should prepare for collision. This final piece I'm going to read tonight, the title is actually taken from a quote my friend wrote me in a letter. My friend Merced, she had passed away several years ago through cystic fibrosis, and I used some medical terminology and some dictionary definitions, which I will use quotes to let you know that I'm doing so. And these are plenty and manifold. To Merced. Dear Merced, the world is a book composed of water, and tonight every word floods your paper-thin body. A hallmark of cystic fibrosis is salty-tasting skin. Again, the trembling oceans and this fear of asphyxiation. Again, each page turns to pulp in our hands, our fingers water-wrinkled like a parody of wisdom. Cure, to heal, restore to health, the act or method of preserving food, for example, with salt. If I had once kissed your back, would it have tasted brackish? Or did your skin deceive, mislead those who loved you into believing you were cured? In every culture, the true trickster is time. How do we navigate past a maze of minutes, with grains like memories dotting the path to the mouth of the labyrinth? With strings we branch like a bronchial tree. Tonight, for instance, is your birthday, the first since your death. How do we escape when even the word birth is hidden within labyrinth. Nearly belated, but here it is. Happy birthday, Merced. There are 4 minutes left until midnight. I almost forgot, and for that, forgive me. Did I ever tell you how the romantic wanted to surprise his wife? He inflated a roomful of multi-hued balloons. By morning, they had shrunk, deflated by a defect undetected. Other symptoms include hypoxia, inadequate oxygenation of the blood. The woman gasped when the man opened the door. Shriveled with time, the balloons lay like rotten fruit. Listen, all of us quietly hiss and leak the air we breathe. What I mean is even one tender gesture is too much for our skin to bear. Dolania americana, a female mayfly which lives a mere 5 minutes after its final molt. Some mayflies mate in a mass orgy so viscous it's detectable by radar. Most are born without mouths. Imagine our main purpose as sex and starvation. Now, tell me everything you know about hunger. Another hallmark is appetite, paired with poor growth. My mother advises salt water to kill the weeds lurking near my garden. She says they will choke what eventually we could eat. I am thinking of the sweet flesh of a melon. I am thinking of sinking my teeth through the ripe meat of my palm, down past the sweat into the salt of blood. There are things I'm afraid to admit. Teeth, flesh, hemoptysis. There are times when I wish we had no mouth. Some shipwrecked men burned, delirious with thirst. My father was a sailor. Ever since I was a child, we sang water, water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. Other men drowned. And buried in that very water, oxygen like treasure locked in a chest. I am learning about breath. I am learning an embrace of air is sometimes called atmosphere, an embrace of skin a body, an embrace of ocean dangerous, while that of time brief, an embrace of fears and flaws weeds. And these, you once said, are plenty and manifold. Brine, buoyant, these are words written in salt and sown into the waves, and whosoever could read them would be saved. But these bodies, diseased, made mostly of water, of thirst, are worthless, and only the illiterate drink. Thank you very much.
Thank you. A very intense poem. I'd like to tell a little bit of a story for how our next reader got here. About 10 years ago, I had the pleasure to meet Madeline DeFries, who is a Pacific Northwest poetry treasure. And she's 90 what now? 95. So she's now living in Portland and has retired from the poetry scene, but her legacy lives on. And after meeting her, this reading started about 9 years ago. I asked her if she would come here to read. And I just looked up the date, and it was April 19, 2007 that Madeline DeFries came. And I remember her telling me on the phone, because she didn't do email, that she was really excited because it could be, she was up for the Pulitzer Prize right around that time. And she didn't win, but it would have been such a hoot if she'd won, because the reading she gave would have been right after the announcement, which I thought I was crossing my fingers for her. But she was shortlisted for the Pulitzer Prize in Poetry, which is amazing. Anyway, in following up more recently about some of her poetry, I discovered that our next reader, Anne McDuffie, has been helping Madeline's estate with her poetry and putting it online and managing a website, and is helping with permissions and things like that. So we got to talking about that, and then you had a turn to, I invited you if you could read, and so I'm glad you could read. Let me read a bit more of the official bio. Anne McDuffie writes poetry, essays, and reviews. Recent work has appeared in the Los Angeles Review and Colorado Review online. She was a 2011 Jack Straw Fellow, which is a great club to be in, and she received a 2012 For Culture grant for Deep Geography, a poetry and painting collaboration with Anne Vandervelde. Am I saying that right? Since 2007, she has also worked with Madeleine DeFries on her archive and publications, and maintains the website for Madeleine at madeleine-defries.com. And please check out that site and her work. Highly recommended. A graduate of the Rainier Writing Workshop at Pacific Lutheran University, Anne lives with her husband and 2 daughters in Seattle, and you can find her online at annmcduffie.com. And she writes a poem or two. So please welcome Anne.
You're taller than I am. How's that? Can you hear me okay? Okay. I'm going to start with a poem by Madeleine. You may be familiar with her work already, but if you're not, really all you need to know for background to this poem is that she was a nun for 38 years, and she went into the convent at 16. So although she wrote this poem later in life, it's set in the convent before she took her vows, the novitiate, when she was still in training. Visiting Sunday Convent Novitiate. The parlor doors shall be glazed, the custom book says, to facilitate supervision. Each time the doorbell rings, the sister portress glides over the gleaming hardwood of the foyer to greet the families come for their allotted 45 minutes a month. Ever the guardian angel, she seats the guests, goes back to wait for others. From the practice room of the parlor, Cole Porter's Night and Day seeps under the door, flows over the transom, as my cousin Arnold begins to play my favorite song, the forbidden worldly music. Orchestra member, composer, arranger, this is the cousin who knows how to transpose on sight. And now the shadow of the portress crosses the frosted glass. Quickly, Arnold coaxes the upright piano into a classic stance, modulates smoothly into the Paderewski minuet in G. What a moment of triumph for me. My versatile cousin, the artist holding the bloodhounds at bay. The portress, no doubt, reproaches herself for alarm of the ear. She must have misheard. No miscreants here. Just dear devotees of traditional music. She taps twice with her ring, pops open the door, waits to be introduced. Arnold flashes his heart-melting smile. I mention his Mass of the Bells, premiered, I add, at St. Joseph Church in Capitola, California. The portress asks God to bless us, moves on. Arnold slips me his latest love song, asks me to write the lyric. She eventually left the order because she couldn't commit completely to being a nun and being a poet. So poetry won out. The poems I'm going to read tonight are all ekphrastic poems, which means that they respond to a work of art. And I'm going to start with a few that I wrote while I was in the Jack Straw program. We had the opportunity when we were there to not start the program, but participate in a program that the Seattle Art Museum was starting called Sam Word. And for that, they invited us to choose an exhibit in the museum, to write in response to it, and then to give a reading in the gallery with the art, which was really cool. So I chose Alden Mason, who's having a retrospective there then. And he was a Seattle painter. So the first poem, I don't know if you can see very well, but this is a little picture of this painting. It's kind of an abstract landscape. And I like the way he, in his art, tended to sort of blur the line between landscape and portrait. They were kind of one and the same to him. They could go multiple ways. This is Winter. I made a path of my body, carving ruts in the frozen ground, bed for black earth, where snow might soften and disappear. I made a path of my body, moving always toward the possible trees. I followed spur and switchback, grove beyond grove. Crooked in the elbow of a rushing stream, I listened as a breeze paged through leaves. Pollen rose in the sunlight that pierced the branches. A full moon paled overhead. And one by one, the trees inhaled, readying the words I'd waited all winter to say. This is a second Alden Mason painting, and I lifted one line of this poem verbatim from the U.S. Geological Survey website, which just proves you can find poetry anywhere. Moraine. There are spaces I can only guess at between the little and the lesser known, between dark shapes bedded down in the landscape. Not infinite, but uncountable, these galaxies. Rock, sand, and silt, licked into slump and hillock by tongues of ice. Each alcove the bite of a landslide. If I'm honest, I'll admit to seeing only edges, stranded on the border between was and is. I have to scrape back, hollow out, try to find my depth in the velvet dark. Mind of ice, mind of water, a braided force that compels me. What is made collects. What's collected shifts. Over time, I've learned what doesn't draw the eye at first may yet hold it. And this is the only other Alden Mason poem I will read. It has an epigraph. The poem is called Billy. It has an epigraph. In the head, you can put anything you think. Alden Mason was great when he explained his art because he's very straightforward about it. And so he invented these paintings he called big head paintings, which was basically a big outline of a head with images in it. And, I love that because it's an invented form, like poets are always inventing form. And he did a bunch of these big head paintings. So this one is called Billy. The rabbit in his hand wants to outrun clouds. One is following him down the slope, ruffling the grasses, ruffling his fur. You can see in his eyes how the land shudders, feeling the boy blow over. In sleep, he stitches a path up the far mountain, tracks cinching tight. Climbs past skunk cabbage, their stamens raised like torches. Fish move through the dry stream beds, innocent of names. On a cave wall, he meets himself, silent and running. He takes up reptile, mammal, stick and stone, a portable storm. young hand on the rabbit's neck, its shock his own. Alden Mason grew up in Skagit, so I always imagine him, that boy, running around in Skagit. I'm sort of low on visual aids tonight, but I do have a postcard of this painting, which is what the next poem is responding to. This is Picasso. It's probably a fairly familiar painting, especially if you saw the exhibit when it was here a couple of years ago. It's called Paul as Harlequin, and it's a picture that he started and never finished of his first son, Paolo, by his first wife, Olga Kornikova. And I think that's all I need to say. Paul as Harlequin. He has, as they say in French, 2 or 3 years, high color, sturdy cheeks, and the faraway look of a child who thinks in stories. 2 feet never still enough to be drawn. Someone has dressed him as Harlequin, clown and devil cut from the same cloth, the patchwork of days and nights he's been held, sung to, cried over, cooed over, scolded, implored. Groomed for the role that was always his, to undo the old man with his antics. Elder lover, ancient father, Picasso wanted no part of that commedia. Turning through phases like the moon, his love rarely a loaf, always a sickle. He wielded his brush on what emerged, dark eyes and a horsehair cushion, lace at the throat, and the foolish cuffs that hide wrists he should have preferred to paint unadorned. So plump, I'm certain they creased at the bend, as if bound to his father by a single unbreakable thread. Partway through writing that, I thought maybe I ought to do a little more research because I was afraid I was being unfair to Picasso and he wasn't that bad a father. And then when I did a little more research, I discovered he was worse than I thought. So that's a kind poem. This poem needs a little preface. I went to New York for a conference a few years ago, and I spent a lot of time in museums while I was there. And so a couple things I was interested in writing this poem were how all that concentrated looking changed how I saw everything, and the remarkable difference between the experience the artist had making the piece and my experience of it. So the few artists referenced in this poem are Mondrian. I'll just mention them in case they're not familiar. Mondrian, who's a Dutch artist who does very rectilinear, geometric, abstract paintings. Lucian Freud, who's best known for his portraits and the way he handles skin. It's really kind of almost topographical. But I also saw some etchings he'd done of foliage. And then Rothko, who's best known for his color field paintings, which are also abstract, kind of floating planes of color. But I saw some paintings of his that were earlier and actually had figures in them. So those are all in here. Painting out the window. Painting out the window of a taxi crossing the East River. A composition in rectangular planes. Crossing the East River in a taxi, after Mondrian, after Freud, after Rothko. I've spent my last afternoon in New York gorging on all the art I could see. Factory windows on the opposite shore compose themselves in the late winter light. Steel frames milk, steel frames mud and gold, a pane pushed out or broken, black plum that pockets the slant of day, a silence, a velvet that holds its dust, a rest between this departure and the next. This vision, the vibration of the last note that sounded, its after-image still electric in the air. Painting out the window, said Lucian Freud, I think I've generally done it when my life's been very strained. Such delicate surgery to interpret flesh, eyes, the soul behind them. What solace, then, the gaze unmet, the back garden scratched leaf by stem into a waxed plate, mind brushing the uneven surface until the negatives reversed. Black is white, left is right. You don't know how it's going to come out. Underbrush, understory, loop, whorl, and arch. The marquee over Renew Autobody declares they're striving at perfection. And don't I sometimes batter my own lines trying to pound out the dents? Near LaGuardia Community College, epoxy fills the fault lines in a wall, a shallow impression of Rothko's early creatures, curios floating in a watery cabinet of unclouded ocean beneath unruffled sky. I would like to say, insisted Rothko, to those who think of my pictures as serene, that I have imprisoned the most utter violence in every inch of their surface. In the back seat, in camera, I watch what passes through me, as though I am the lens and the mirror and the light that will touch each ordinary thing. I know I have barely begun. I am still this side of the water, staring down a long line of houses on the opposite shore, glimpsing lit rooms like ideas unfolding, while the structures around them dissolve into snow and ash, narrow frames squared against the colors that spill incandescent from each window. This is the only poem I have, this next one, that is not responding to a piece of visual art, but to a piece of theater. You might remember a couple of years ago, maybe it was a couple of years, I have no sense of time, maybe it was a decade ago, no, I think it was a couple of years ago, that there was a censored version of Huck Finn published that was meant for high school students, and there was a lot of debate about that. And shortly after that book came out, Book It Repertory Theater in Seattle did an uncensored version of Huck Finn for the stage. And we went to see it. It was fantastic. And afterward, they had a talk back with the actors. And it was fascinating to me to listen to them talk about how they prepped for the performance and how they felt about performing it. And also, I thought a lot about afterward what it was like for me hearing it spoken aloud. Huck Finn, uncensored. At the talkback after the performance, the actor said, "To speak in a 19th century voice, one must practice saying the censored word every day." And then he demonstrated for us the warm-up, 3 times fast. Here's how it always catches me off guard. The N, smooth as poured chocolate. The grate of G that takes skin every time. And the R that curls back on itself like a river, 3 times fast, because a river has a mind of its own. It was funny. I mean, it wasn't funny, the actor said, of those rehearsals, where they repeated it by the dozens to break it down to syllables, phonemes, a trickle of sound. And then, in the breathing silence of an audience, I heard it rise again, with its many lives, its unknowable currents, its bends and blind corners that conceal, always conceal, how short the drop, how deep the pit, the ground coming up so fast. This is my last poem. We went to Washington, D.C. for spring break about a year ago, and I got to spend a few hours alone in the National Gallery, which was lovely for me because I could move very slowly through the Dutch still life room and the Vermeers. I love Dutch still life, and I love especially the Vanitas paintings, which are highly symbolic and basically always are telling you how earthly life and earthly goods are transient, and you should have your mind on higher things. This is Still Life with Tourist in the National Gallery. A frowsy tulip stands watch over the snail that makes its way across the fallen pods and petals. I skirt the other tourists' dangling tote bags, flashing their cell phone selfies by the fountain. One child traces a lilting path through the crowd, pinning me with a glance I do not satisfy. Algae fouls the water in a clouded vase. Fly speck dots the furred peach, and mildew powders the grapes. Clutches of pollen hang from swollen anthers, and a butterfly flies upside down, flashing the dull underside of its wings. In every gallery, the guard's step behind me reminds me that I look too long. Time is short, the morning glory trumpets into a ripening darkness. It fills the eye. Rabbit laid on its back, hips twisted and haunches spread, belly bared like a full-blown rose, not a breeze. One dark eye still shines, and I bend to look more closely. I know the tricks of composition meant to make these paintings speak. Spoils of the hunt eloquently splayed, the remains of the feast scattered across the table, blooms of different seasons set side by side in a single bouquet. And yet, they fill the eye. The eye fills. Mute olive, slicked with brine. Thank you.
Thank you. I think both of our readers used the word brine. Did you use the word brine? Yes. It sticks out at me. We can take a short break in a moment here, but I wanted to let you know of a couple of other events coming up. The Redmond Association of Spoken Word has its monthly meeting on the last Friday of the month at the Old Redmond Schoolhouse Community Center. And this month, together with the open mic, we're having something a little unusual. We're having Tom Hitzroth, who will be giving a lecture, which counts as spoken word, if you want to call it a lecture, on Redmond history. So he'll be bringing some pictures. I think there's a PowerPoint and so on, and he'll be giving an overview of the history of Redmond. This town is 100 years old, and it has some colorful characters. And if you hadn't heard the story, the city was incorporated because people wanted to tax, they wanted to tax the liquor establishments. And they had 299 people in the area, and they needed 300 to incorporate. And at one of the big discussion meetings, somebody piped up and said, well, Mrs. So-and-so had a baby 2 weeks ago. So they incorporated on the last day of December 101 years ago, and that's how Redmond became incorporated. And we'll learn about things like that and some of the buildings and other details of Redmond history. And that will be followed by an open mic for poetry or fiction or whatever else you'd like to share. So please come to that. That's the RASP reading last Friday of the month at the Old Redmond Schoolhouse Community Center. And right after that, February 1st, is the start of National Haiku Writing Month. So if you'd like to give yourself, have any of you done NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month? There's a hand. Where you write an entire novel for the month of November. Well, if you want something harder, try writing one haiku a day, every day for the entire month of February, the shortest month for the shortest genre of poetry. It's harder than you think. And if you want to check out, just as NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, has an acronym or a shortening, NaHaiWriMo.org. .com is the place to check out, and there's also an active Facebook page with almost 2,000 likes on it, and I'm responsible for that. There's a daily writing prompt, and that happens to it goes on year round. So if you want a daily writing prompt, you could check out the Facebook page. We're trying to get them on Twitter too, but we haven't figured out how to automate it. But there's a daily writing prompt, and we're going through the letters of the alphabet, and I think we're at M right now, I think. So we're halfway through the alphabet, and we'll finish with Z a year from February. So please write a haiku every day in February, and bring your haiku to next month's reading. In addition to the Poets Wanted things that I mentioned earlier, please pick up a postcard. Also sign up for the open mic. I also wanted to mention I have copies of my new book, True Color, which, if you've not seen it, it's kind of gimmicky. Instead of opening the pages, you rotate them. And like a painter's swatch, hence the color connection. So there's pictures with all the poems in here, and they're all about different colors. And in Redmond, we're selling this book for $5 each. This is a Redmond Poet Laureate publication, so the city's taking a loss. Outside of Redmond, it's $10, so this is the place to buy them. And I have a few here if you're interested. Let's see. I think that's it for announcements. So please take a break, buy something to drink or eat, and thank you once again to SoulFood and to our featured readers. And we'll get going again in about 10 minutes. Thank you.